Confessions of a Film Poser!
Hey, I'm Vince.
And I'm Eli.
And we are
Film Posers? Film has many genres, but one stands out as the most notorious. Of course, I'm talking about French bedroom farce action comedies. Who doesn't love a movie where half the runtime is spent staring lovingly into someone's eyes during a jewel heist? But coming in at a very close second is horror. The first mainstream American horror film was The Phantom of the Opera, starring the great Lon Chaney. Since then, horror has grown into a fan base that crosses decades and demographics. And it comes in all forms. Vampires, werewolves, Donuts in a haunted house, little girls named Reagan, burn victims who haunt your dreams, machete-wielding hockey goalies, face-shifting hillbillies with chainsaws, a shape, possessed dolls, and of course, the absence of God. Which brings us to our movie this week. 1976's The Omen, directed by Richard Dick Donner, yes, the same visionary behind Superman, Superman 2, The Goonies, and the Lethal Weapon series, Scrooged, and the all-time classic Timeline. He also produced the X-Men films and the 1993 Oscar-sweeping juggernaut Free Willy. Oh, and he also directed 6 episodes of a little-known show from the 1960s called The Twilight Zone, including the iconic episode titled Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. The Omen is a supernatural horror story that became a breakout hit. It follows Robert Thorn, played by Gregory Peck, an American diplomat in Rome. When his wife Catherine, played by Lee Remick, gives birth to a stillborn child, a priest convinces him to secretly adopt another baby without telling her. That child is Damien, and as he grows up, strange and terrifying events begin to surround him. But what really made this film legendary was the belief that it was cursed. Here's a few examples of why. Just before filming began, Gregory Peck's son died. On Peck's flight to London, his plane was struck by lightning. A producer's plane was struck by lightning as well, on a separate trip. And a private jet originally booked for the crew crashed before they could board, killing everyone on the flight. Needless to say, people started wondering if The Omen had a little more power behind it than just movie magic. So with that kind of horror pedigree, a classic status, and so many filmmakers willing to risk their lives to make The Omen, the only real question left is, why haven't we seen it yet? So for me, I've found that there's certain movies that if I didn't watch them as a kid, I just never ended up watching them as an adult. That was kind of what it was for 2001: A Space Odyssey, but this one in particular, this was in the category of like The Exorcist and The Shining of movies that when I was a kid, my parents let me watch a lot of movies and they took me to a lot of movies, but those 3 movies, The Shining, The Exorcist, and this one, were movies that I was never able to watch. And then I just kind of grew up and never watched them. And it seemed to me like an extended, almost Twilight Zone episode. There's that classic Twilight Zone episode where, people get wished into the cornfield by Billy Mooney, the little redhead kid. And then in the end, the guy gets turned into like a Jack in the Box. So I just never, I never had the desire to watch this one. I love horror movies. This seems more like a slow burn-ish kind of a horror film, if it even is classified as a true horror film. I mean, I think it is. I think it's more of a supernatural thing. From what I know about it, it's the son that Mr. Thorn adopts is Damien, and he's the son of the devil or the Antichrist. And I don't know, that always just seemed to me like it would fit very nicely in a 30-minute episode of The Twilight Zone.
I think we had very different upbringings. I grew up with my mom, and she loved scary movies. She loved horror movies. She would always kind of not force them on me, but she would always have them on and ask me to join her in watching them. This one specifically was one that she loved and used to watch. And I remember it being on, but it was never, what year was it made? In the 70s?
1976.
I feel like as a kid, I was down to watch black and white movies, and then I was down to watch like 80s and 90s horror movies, but just something about like the 70s, I just didn't like the feel of it. This was one that she loved, and she asked me to watch a few times, and I never did, and I wish I did. And I know that when it comes to like supernatural, spirit-centric horror movies, that's not your jam at all. So I'm very excited that you're going to watch this one. I tried to get you to watch The Exorcist, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. Maybe.
I like supernatural horror films if they're done right. Like Hereditary is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And, like I thought Insidious was really good. And there's some ones that, that they've done really well that I enjoy. I'm more, when it comes to horror, I like the slasher. I like a movie monster. To go back to what you said before about the black and white, that makes sense to me. And I think if you look at something like the Universal horror movies or the Hammer horror movies, those have a kind of clearly defined monster. This one seems more like a psychological horror thriller. And, like I think The Shining is that way as well. And The Shining's a, dang near perfect movie. So I think, yeah, I'm anticipating, it's got a classic status for a reason.
Yeah.
So my hopes are high that I'm really going to enjoy this one. And, again, I don't mind a slow burn movie if the payoff lands, if it lands the end. And Gregory Peck, who doesn't love Gregory Peck, man? In late stages, Gregory Peck too. And also, I think it's worth mentioning that, like, Richard Donner, I hate to admit, I've watched the Goonies beginning to the end for like the first time, like 2 months ago.
That's crazy.
I've watched parts of it. Like, this is one of those movies that I've turned on so many times and I did not watch as a kid, and ended up really enjoying it. And, much like 2001, I kind of placed myself, like, if I was watching this as a kid, I can see why it would be ingrained in kids and who turned into adults. But, this dude's got so many, like I said, I didn't know he did Twilight Zone, but this guy's got a pedigree, dude, of movies throughout the decades. So I think because of that alone, it makes me very excited to watch this movie. And I look forward to coming back later in the week and talking about it with you.
Me too, dude. It's about time we break into the spookiness, dude.
This is just a taste, and hopefully we can kind of align. You've seen so many horror movies that's going to be the challenge here, is finding horror movies that you haven't watched. But this kind of just whets our beak a little. But without further ado, should we send it over to future Eli and Vince?
I'm ready, dude. Let's do it.
Right, we're back. Thanks, past Eli and Vince. We're here, and we have both watched The Omen. Vince, how are you doing? Are you prepared to talk about this movie?
I'm doing well. I was thoroughly impressed, and I'm excited to break this down.
Yeah, so what was your immediate reaction after watching The Omen? After everything you've heard about it, after all these years as it being heralded as this classic and referenced in other media, what was your initial thought?
My initial thought when I finished the movie was, wow, that was actually really good, and the hype was real. I thought that it was an excellent horror movie. We're going to break it down, but there's a lot of aspects of this movie that I thought were fantastic and worked really well. What about you?
Yeah, I wish I came in here with more of a adversarial view of the movie, but no, I mean, we're 2 for 2. This movie was great. I mean, this movie was fun. There was great character development. The story was great. The direction was great. The editing, dude, the score was fantastic. The score heightened this movie. If this movie is an 8, then the score might have heightened it to 9.5 for me. I thought it was great.
I don't think that I really picked up on any of the specific score aspects of the movie, which is funny because you mentioned that, and right after you said it before we started this, I was thinking about it, and I can't remember a certain scene or song that kind of hit, but now I kind of want to rewatch it, dude.
Now when you rewatch it, pay attention to the score. The score was a character in and of itself, and it heightened everything for me. This movie just hit kind of everything for me. I thought, I definitely have some thoughts on it. We're going to kind of go through a criteria so we don't get lost in the sauce. Let's start with the filmmakers. So this is done by Richard Donner. He did all the movies that I had mentioned in part 1, Goonies, the original Superman movie, some pretty big movies for the time and inspiration. I think he did Lady Hawk as well. Okay. The Michelle Pfeiffer, and I think it's Matthew Broderick classic. But I thought the direction was fantastic, dude. I mean, a lot of times when I'm watching a movie, and you can tell when a director doesn't have strong command over the performances, one of which, like if you watch a Nicolas Cage movie, the movie is going to be as good as the director is in his movies, because if not, those movies where he goes off the rails, with the exception of something like
Vampire's Kiss, he kind of goes, that's like the first, I feel like that's the first Nicolas Cage movie where he just unleashes full Nick Cage. But the direction was good.
If you go back and you watch like Birdie, or you watch even like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which he's got a bit part in, Face Off, like all those movies, he goes pretty hardcore off the rail. I think Face Off was after Vampire's Kiss, but Longlegs, I think is a movie that was designed for the Nicolas Cage vehicle. And so him going off the rails, doing all that wacky stuff that Nick Cage does, is pretty par for the course in that movie. And so that was clever that the director used that to his advantage. But there's some movies that Nicolas Cage is in that you just can't buy him, or you buy him and he plays a very sincere, earnest character. And then there's one scene, dude, where he just he goes off, dude. You can see it just building. And so sometimes that takes me out of the movie. But this one, bringing it back to The Omen, and we're just gonna mix a bunch of the filmmaking team. The script was so tight. The performance by Gregory Peck. So like the only prominent Gregory Peck movie I can think about that I've seen or recall is To Kill a Mockingbird, which he's fantastic in. But dude, he is so good in this movie from the beginning to the end. The beginning, he's just kind of this like rigid. I'm sitting there, and at certain points, I was like, oh, it doesn't seem like he has much chemistry with his wife. And then he just like, as the movie progresses, dude, like it rises and falls with his performance. But as much as Gregory Peck's a great actor, a lot of that falls on Richard Donner, man.
Yeah, I thought that the movie was like, I felt like it was very tight. The storytelling was great. It continued to just get crazier and crazier as he realized that his son was the devil. And he was like kind of questioning it even towards the end until he starts. Spoilers, by the way.
Spoilers. Mad spoilers.
Spoilers.
50-year-old spoilers.
I feel like he had doubt until he finally cut his son's hair and saw that birthmark. And all the crazy shit that happened before that, he was just like, there's a possibility that he's maybe the devil. Maybe he's the one that's attempting to kill my wife, and it's not just like a mishap. But once he cuts the hair, you can like, he's a fantastic actor, and you can see like the oh shit factor hit him, where he's like, okay, I'm gonna have to kill this child, which was wild.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, I always reference Descent into Madness. That's what Kubrick did really well in 2001. We talked about it in The Shining, but I just thought his performance really matched it. And yeah, you know what? And again, I'm jumping around to a little bit of the criteria here, but I loved how each character, and this film was written by David Seltzer, and it was an original idea. I guess he's uncredited, by Harvey Bernhard, but I loved how, okay, you go into it, you know that Damien is the son of the devil, that he's the Antichrist. And so that's the premise. You know it's going to happen. At this point, it's permeated pop culture so much that you know that's what it is. But I thought the introduction of each character and the character, how the character plays into Gregory Peck's viewpoint or worldview was fantastic, and the mysteries just kept unraveling. Shout out to Lee Remick, who played Catherine Thorn, which is Robert Thorn, Gregory Peck's wife. Her performances were great.
Yeah,
she unraveled, and the way that she unraveled was so good. David Warner played Jennings, who was the photographer, and that was to me, that besides Robert Thorn, that was the most compelling character to me. One, he's got the worst haircut I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, dude.
His hair looks like he went to the barber, and the barber pulled out a pair of like the kindergarten scissors that don't let you cut skin, and they're like encrusted with Elmer's glue, and he just told the barber, like, do whatever you think's best, and that's what the barber came out with. I get it's of the time, you know,
but that's just
it's like
a
very British
haircut.
mod.
Yeah,
it's British mod, whatever, but it's the worst haircut of all time. But he was fantastic. You know, I always remember him from Secret of the Ooze. He plays the scientist from TCGI, TCRI. That you know, well, they're not stupid, they're babies. Like, so many great movies, so many great lines from him in that movie. He's great. He was great in this. I love so much of the plot unhinged around him. You know, when he got his head decapitated, I was like, man, that's probably the first proper haircut he's ever had, was just taking it all the way off. And I was glad not to have to look at it again. But, you know, he was great. Dude,
I feel like
the casting,
when his head comes off, obviously, like the horror makeup and special effects aren't the best. This is an older movie.
They were pretty good, though.
They were pretty good. But I feel like the head that flew off of him had, like you said, like a tighter haircut to it. It was almost a better hairdo than the actual actor, which I thought was super funny.
Well, maybe they were trying to fix it. They were like, his hair is terrible. Let's make the dummy. Let's give him some dignity.
The special effects person was like, I refuse. I'm going to make it better.
Yeah. Shout out again to Mrs. Baylock, who was played by Billy Whitelaw. She was fantastic. You know, as soon as she walks into the scene, the whole thing shifts. You know, she was so much of that hinged on her and her sycophancy or her fanaticism over the Antichrist. And then you evolve further through Father Brennan, who was played by Patrick Troughton. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct if there's any Brits watching, or I think he's actually Irish. Correct me, whatever. He was fantastic too. The scene with him in the park right before he gets the spear right, you know, into the chest. But the way all these characters start and then, you know, they unravel as the story does, the writing on this great script by David Seltzer, that really was the highlight to me. Like I said, in 2001, the plot is very thin. This one, it's like you're 3/4 through the movie and you're still going, what's going to happen? What's going on? And I thought that was great.
Yeah. Watching it, I definitely picked up on some like lines and tags that I've heard throughout culture, and like "It's all for you, Damien."
It's all for you, Damien.
Yeah, which that scene was incredible. Probably top 3 scenes was the woman jumping off and hanging herself after saying "It's all for you, Damien."
Yeah.
The father getting pierced.
Yeah, getting speared, dude. He got the spear.
He got speared.
That spiritual spear, dude. Dude, really quick before you move on from it, the scene where she hangs herself, or when she offs herself, probably shouldn't say hang on YouTube. When she offs herself, dude, that scene was so great because the tip off was when the mom takes Damien. The mom senses something's weird with the nanny, takes Damien, and she's like, "It's okay, ma'am. Like, I'll take him." Like, takes ownership.
Yeah.
And then when you see her, like, you know, she has the thing with the dog, the devil dog, as I call him, the Rottweiler. And then, like, to do it, the striking thing about that scene to me was that she did it in front of a bunch of kids. There was one kid's reaction in there where it was like, it was almost like the kid wasn't acting and he was just like, did anybody else see that? Like, that lady just jumped off that building.
Yeah,
that scene,
it was intense.
Was
it was a great way to start the movie.
Yeah.
I love the small detail of not only did she off herself, but she also broke through the window, and just the whole scene like was like so jarring. And back to the devil dog, that was going to be my third like highlight of the movie. The way that they filmed that dog and made you feel like he was himself the devil. And there's like certain like shadowy scenes where you can't see his face. He's just like a dark figure walking through the house. It was so good. So creepy, man.
So good. And then the scene in the cemetery where they're digging up the graves. So
it's like hellhounds.
Did they confirm that his son is it almost like, I know that there's, you know, there's multiple sequels and a reboot of this from 2006, I believe it was, they remade this movie, but it made me want to go watch the sequels and go like, where does this go?
Too,
you know, the concept of, you know, the revelations that was foretold and this kid springing up in like a political family, and that is kind of the mechanism in which he amasses power and the way that the devil used it. I thought that was so cool. But did they confirm that they swapped Damien with the other kid and the other kid's still alive? Or no, the kid's body was in there, right?
Yeah, they confirmed they opened up the mother of Damien, and it was one of the hellhounds, and then they opened up his child's grave, and the child's remains were in there. And if you notice, I don't know if you noticed, but like the skull looked like it was bashed in. So that's whenever he says that they killed my kid. Yeah. And it was intense, dude, because you really didn't know what to expect when they opened it, and when they did, it just kind of sunk in that this is a wild movie, man.
Dude, so good. And so, like, looking at the theme of this movie in theme reminded me so much of why I really loved Hereditary, because it gets into the spiritual aspect of, you know, tragedy strikes, stillborn baby at the beginning. He's afraid the mom can't take it because she really wanted this child. And then, you know, the priest, who obviously was also connected to bringing the Antichrist or protecting the Antichrist or introducing the Antichrist into the world, convinces him to take this baby, switch it. It would, you know, she would think it's a blessing and the baby would be blessed. It reminds me a lot of Hereditary, because a lot of the same themes, you know, the brilliance of that movie, spoilers, and how it's a family drama up until about an hour in, and then the daughter's head comes off. Yeah. And then the rest of it is this unraveling of how the family deals with it. The son feels blame. The mom blames the son. You know, most of these possession movies, it's so surface level, and it's so, to me, it's like they use demonic imagery for the scare, but they don't handle like almost like in a biblical spiritual warfare. You know, I thought that was like a component of this movie. It's not surface level, you know, it goes deep and it deals into like a spiritual nature. And that's what I loved about Hereditary. And that's really what I loved about this. You know, it was like the priest was telling him, like, dude, you got to drink the blood and eat the flesh. Like, if you don't, all of these things are going to happen. He didn't listen. So I loved it. I really loved this movie.
I think that's the issue with a lot of modern, because there was like the huge gap between like 2000 to like even kind of now they're still kind of doing it, where all the horror movies that were coming out were all kind of spiritual movies, but like you said, they lacked the in-depth knowledge of like combining the dark side with the light side and how to combat it. And I feel like that's why a lot of the Insidious and what's the other that was like the found footage one where their house was haunted. Dang, what is it called?
The one with Ethan Hawke.
No.
Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity. Like it's still spiritual. It's still like, it's not as much as like a demon as much as of like just a haunting, but there was they didn't branch all of that darkness with any light at all. So it just, I don't know. It didn't inspire hope. A lot of them are based off of like jump scares and stuff. And it's just, they're not my favorite type of scary movies. Whenever it comes to spiritual stuff, now The Omen is going to be added to one of my lists. The Exorcist, if you ever go and see it, the duality of evil versus good is done so well in that movie. And that's why they're on the top list for like top horror movies ever made, man. They did a fantastic job.
I think it taps into something that human beings, like, demon possession is a scary thing, but I think filmmakers want to play footsie with the concept of a biblical demon. You know, in this case, this movie's very Catholic. Yes. That's one of the other things I'll say is like, when this movie started, like, I loved the shots because it was shot in Italy and it was very Gothic, and it just seemed larger than, you know, there was more spiritual themes and biblical, but they want to play footsie with the biblical aspect of demons and demonology, but they don't want to, the thing that defeats the demons biblically is the things that they don't want to get into, which is more of the dogma or what, you know, I'm sure people don't want to be too preachy. And so they put the power against demons into the hands of human beings. And that just doesn't work for me. Like, if there's a higher power to me that's, you know, or a supernatural power that's possessing a human being, like, the human being at that point doesn't have the control to dispossess that thing. And this movie is straight up biblical in a lot of ways. And same thing with The Exorcist. You know, the lack of faith is the weakness in these movies, or at least is the way that I see it. Dude. Right. So that's the thing. Like, that's the theme that I really enjoyed about this movie. I really, really like this movie. I don't know if it's too soon to do, you know, shout out, like I said, the score and the sound mixing was freaking added so much to it, and the creepiness, and, you know, when the dog's looking at him, you hear the dog. Dude, the scene with the baboons, what did they do to piss those baboons off so bad, like, when they were making the movie?
Well, this was just the 70s, so they probably did some shady shit.
Or they were just dangling bananas going, hey, if you attack this car, we'll give you this whole bushel of bananas. Really quick, props to casting, right? We've already mentioned the great cast performances. Dude, I so wish I could have been a fly on the wall when they were casting Damien, dude. Because, you know, they just went through a bunch of headshots and were like, I don't know, this kid, it's between, the name of the actor who played Damien was Harvey Stevens, which is an evil name, in my opinion. Like, if you name your kid Harvey, you got other, you know, alternatives. But it's like, I could just picture the casting director and the director and the filmmaker sitting around going, you know what? I like Harvey. He looks evil. He's 5, but he looks like, you know, he looks like, I don't know, Steve, Gary over here. Nah, Gary's too cherub-like. Gary looks too angelic and too hopeful for the future. Harvey looks like Charles Manson. We need a kid that looks like he can amass a following and enact killings, you know, on his command.
He has dead eyes. He's perfect.
His eyes are dead. His eyes have been dead since birth. But on the flip side, it's like, then there's the parents of Harvey who are like, you know, honey, our kid could make a killing in the film industry. You know how evil this kid looks? He looked at me the other day and I shivered.
It is a funny concept to think about the casting for kids in horror movies, and the idea that they're like, okay, yeah, this kid's so creepy. This
kid could peel paint with a stare.
But whenever you see Harvey Stevens, you're like, yeah, he's pretty creepy, dude. I believe.
Dude, but I gotta say, on the flip side, Harvey Stevens, that's the other thing about this movie, is like, so much of it isn't about Damien. Yeah. Like, a lot of the sequences that are like moving the story forward, you know, the people that he kills, or the Mrs. Blaylock around him, protecting him and you know, being like his cultivator. Like, yes, but it's really about Gregory Peck, which is the interesting thing about this movie that I didn't expect, because I thought it was just going to be about Damien. I thought it was going to be head spinning and he's doing all this stuff with magic powers, and that's not what the movie about. That movie, so much of the terror is internal, and dude, I dug it. I dug it. Shout out to the editors.
The base storyline is this dad pretty much like being a detective and going to figure out everything. And then they flash back to the kid just doing terrible things.
Right. The other genius about that character of Damien is they let him be kids. In certain moments, they allowed him to be a kid. You know, like when he's on at the birthday party, like he's doing kid things. So it's not 100% pure evil. And that's an interesting element too, because then that pays off at the end when Gregory Peck is forced to make this decision to kill him. And then like that says a lot about his character, because even though he's like accepted that this is the Antichrist and he holds the power to stop the Antichrist from coming into the world, and then, you know, in the end, like he is the one that gets killed because he didn't listen. He didn't drink the blood and eat the flesh, dude. And that was the thing that, you know, was foretold, and he didn't do it. So I echo your sentiments. I thought this movie was great, man. And I'd give it a rewatchability score of 5 of 5.
I agree with you. It had also, I do want to touch on some of the cinematography. There were some really cool shots and some really experimental shots, dude. Like there's a few handheld scenes where I'm trying to I wish I watched it last night, but there were some scenes where I was like, oh, they shot this in such a cool way. That probably was just the director saying, like, what if we did this? And just kind of groundbreaking.
I think it was by design, because like what I was saying before, and I meant to get to this, thanks for bringing this up, because I noticed at the beginning there's so many like wide shots and so many angles that were shot up. And then as the movie went on, it got tighter and tighter and tighter on Gregory Peck in some of those scenes. Or, you know, like when they're in the priest's like living quarters and he's got the Bible all pasted on the wall and he's got all the that was such a like claustrophobic thing. And then so yeah, I think it was by design. Okay, so you give it 5 out of 5 watchability.
I do.
I give it 5 out of 5 rewatchability. This is going to be added to my list every year. One last thing before we go, I want to bring up, like, do you have an unpopular opinion about this movie? It's great, we've already acknowledged that. Top to bottom, was there anything in here that you feel like was kind of a drag?
The only thing, and it's just a small gripe that I have, is when the movie first started and they had the kid and they're walking around. I could see how, like, this is an older movie, so I have to remember that people looked older than I think that they actually were. So these people were probably like, well, the actors were probably older, but like to start a family at like, they look like they're 40 or 50. And then they have like a 4 or 5 year old son, kind of drew me back for a second. Cause I was like, well, these actors are kind of old to be starting a family. But again, that's the only gripe I had, was just for a second. I was like, oh, these people are really old.
But see, well, that, like, to me, that kind of like, I thought that represented like an inverse of the Abraham and Sarah story, which Abraham was like the father of the nation of Israel. And Sarah was 90 and she couldn't have kids, and God told Abraham, like, oh no, she's gonna have kids.
Oh, okay.
And they're like, okay, we'll trust you. And then she ended up having Isaac, I believe it was. And so it's kind of like, which led to like, that's the lineage of like Christ. So it's kind of this like inverse of that. Okay. Maybe I was reading into it. Maybe I was, you know, looking for
I do like that
too much.
Explanation though.
Yeah. It's and I don't know. Somebody could be watching this going, no, it wasn't. What are you, stupid?
But other than that, I had no other issues with the movie. I thought it was great. What about you?
I'll say my only thing about this movie is it took itself so serious. You know what I mean? It's like, are we having fun with this movie? Which played off. Like, this isn't like an offbeat comedy action horror.
Yeah.
But there's just moments where it took itself so serious. And I think my solution is, I think you have one character. If I'm remaking this movie, I do it the exact same, but I had one Ryan Reynolds character that's just like the maintenance worker at the estate, right? And he just comes in at the end of a sequence where something dark happens and just adds like some little quip.
Just a little like, comedy flair to it.
Yeah, he's just like the groundskeeper of this estate. And he's like at the birthday party after the lady offs herself and she's sitting there hanging. They just cut back to the punch bowl and he's sitting there going, this is one hell of a party. And then they cut to the next scene.
Or
you know
he's
what I
about
mean?
to take a bite of his sandwich because he's on lunch break.
This one,
And then that
Yeah.
happens, and he's like,
yeah. Or like, you know, he's on the phone ordering supplies for cleaning around the estate. And then Damien drops his mom off the second story. And he's just like, yeah, you know, let me get 2 bottles of that bleach and splat. You know what, Frank? Better make that 3 bottles.
or at least a scene of him cleaning up the demon dog shit.
Dude,
Well-
that's literally the next thing I was gonna say is like he's cleaning. There's just a shot. It's like it's doesn't need to be in the movie.
He's just
It's
in the
first thing-
background, dude, and it's just a nightmare.
No, yeah, but you cut like it's a shot that does not need to be in the movie. And when you're cutting stuff, it's the first thing that goes. But it's him picking up dog poop, and he just Deadpool looks at the camera and goes, "They say he's a Satan, but he's never done a human-sized dump on the lawn or something." just quick and then out to where like people like it's not enough time to be like that was weird, but enough time for people to go like, did I really just see Ryan
Yeah,
Reynolds?
dude.
Like, dude, we should just do a cut where Ryan Reynolds is cut, like we cut him into the movie making little quips. But that's it. That's the only thing. It's like, you know, it was a little stoic at times, but again, that really set the tone, and then you know it gets going and it doesn't stop. So, do you have anything else to add to this?
No.
I feel like we're getting one step closer to being pros and not posers, dude.
Yeah,
We're,
well, this is the second episode in. Both movies have lived up to the hype.
Sure.
One was good, but didn't really have a rewatchability score that
Right.
I feel like I love. This one, I'm adding it to the list every year, dude.
Yeah.
The Omen. I'm the Omen boy now.
I agree, dude. And this is one that like if they release in 4K, I'm picking it up, dude.
And-
And I almost hope there's like I almost wish there was a director's cut, because you know they cut a bunch of gnarly stuff out of this movie.
And unlike 2001, I'm excited to check out the sequel to this.
You know, maybe we add that one to the list, dude. Maybe we do a follow up. We'll see. We'll see the response. But hey, thanks for joining us on our second episode of Confessions of a Film Poser. If you liked what you saw, if you like the format, if you like the concept, if you like the movies we're watching, go ahead and subscribe. Give us a like. Come back, comment, you know, let us know where we were wrong, what we can improve upon, and suggest movies that you think we should watch and classics that maybe have gone under the radar for us for a little bit. We're looking to shed our poser status and really become true film cinephiles that we think we are in our head.
Yeah, I want to go to a funeral or a wedding and be able to know my stuff.
Anyway, we'll be back next week. Thank you guys. Episodes drop on Sunday. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Confessions of a Film Poser.